this first session of two parts, Ask Our Families, Raising Kids Sane and Safe. This is brought to you by Family Enrichment Society. So I just need to do a small little blurb about who FES is. First of all, my name is Nicholas, and I'm a volunteer with FES. FES runs programs to help build loving and lasting families. And really, much of the work is put into education of families, such as these talks. They also run certificate programs where you can actually attend as parents to try to figure out how best to raise your kids. So you can go to the website to check out what FES offers in terms of the different things, sessions, webinars, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Also, this topic this evening deals with a lot about mental stress, right? And we know that we are in unprecedented times. I'm sure many of the parents here probably going bonkers because of the 2-week HBL, and maybe that's why you came this evening. The kids are also going through very different times from that of the past. And so I think this evening's program is going to be interesting. We do have subject matter expert Nicholas Gabriel Lim with us to talk about this. But before that, let me introduce you to our host this evening, Avril Hong. Avril's a presenter with CNA and has kindly agreed to spend this Friday evening with us. Thank you very much, Avril.
No worries.
I will hand it over to you to introduce Nicholas and ask the questions. And as we rehearse, you're supposed to ask really difficult questions. Don't give Nicholas a break. So the talk will be roughly an hour and a half. Avril explained the format and so on and so forth. Yeah. So over to you, Avril.
Yeah, thanks, Nick Lee. So we have two Nicholases here with us this evening, on the team at least. So I always have to make sure which Nick I'm talking about. So the one that will be the subject matter expert for this evening is Nicholas Lim. He is a psychologist. He's also a father of 3, so very qualified to speak on this. He also teaches at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. He's got 2 decades of experience dealing with youth, and he also volunteers on advisory councils such as the Media Literacy Council. So as Nick Lee mentioned earlier, these are unprecedented times, very trying, and especially in the pandemic, people are going through mental, emotional, even financial distress. Let's start off, Nick Lim. Maybe you can start by telling us, how can we help our children as well as help ourselves, and in a way that you spot the mental illness that your kids have, and also not relay whatever stress you're having onto your own children?
Thank you, Gabriel. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank FES for this opportunity. And I'd like to also congratulate a firm here this evening for being present in this dialogue together with me. Working with young people is really something that I feel drawn towards to and called towards to. So I hope to share some meaningful antidotes with everybody here tonight. So to the question that Gabriel asked me, how can we, engage in this topic about mental health issues? I think first and foremost, we need to start to be open to each other. Both the parents and the kids want to be open to each other to talk about anything under the sun. If that is an issue, if that is difficult, then we want to learn how to start having conversations or start, I would say, acting around in a household, in a community, in a manner in which that would encourage open communication, right? And I suppose it'd be very difficult to answer the question, right, about whether my child has mental health issues, because we are seeing them every other day. And a good start, I would say, would be to take note. I won't say take note. Actually, it'll come to you very in your face, because it's something that's not so normal, right? So that's the first line, I would say, where you begin to start to want to wonder whether or not there's something amiss. That's one. The other thing is, if our kids are behaving in such a way where they are taking it to the extreme, then that's actually another sign where you actually want to like flag, it's like a red flag, like, hey, what's up? What's happening? How come the behaviors are so extreme? Although it's quite familiar, right? But it has like become a little bit more extreme. So you want to begin to take note of that. Yeah.
What are some of the examples?
Unless we are open.
What are some of the examples
No problem.
of more extreme behavior among teenagers? I expect, that's maybe where some of the more trying times start happening. What are some of the examples that you can share with us?
Sure. With teens, the more extreme ones could be increased isolation, start closing the door, long hours of like gaming, for example. You begin to see maybe some red lines on their wrist, on their upper arms, right? More vulgarities, sleeping a lot more, these are extreme behaviors, right? Previously not seen. Slightly younger, maybe in his 13 years old, maybe 12 years old. We're talking about like having through a lot of tantrums, screaming and shouting at their siblings, very agey, very impulsive. These are like telltale signs. So this is what I mean by extreme behaviors, right? Yeah. Relating to the part about having to be open, then we want to take the opportunity to ask, our kids, say, hey, what's up? What's happening? Is it okay if I speak to you for a while? Example, I know of families where, right? If you're fetching your child to some enrichment class, or like to school, for example, that right there, could be a good window of opportunity to ask the question. Hey, the other day you shot at your sibling, your brother or sister, something that's really unbecoming, right, of you as an older brother. What's that about, right? So you really want to have that kind of conversation with your child. And the key thing about young people, right, is that they would really want to be listened to, and it matters to them that you are taking interest, right? It's very different when they were a lot younger, when you just tell them one, they will do one, then you can expect them to be very obedient, but when it comes to teenagers, a bit tough, right? And you ask them, say, hey, stop your computer, do your homework. High chances that they probably won't listen to you, and they continue to do what they want to do. Stop drinking, stop vaping, what have you. I mean, the teenagers, right? I'm not sure whether you're familiar with all these terms, these activities that teenagers actually are engaged in, right? Yeah. So you want to have those conversations. So all these things are only possible when there's openness, right? And to each other, right? Openness towards what the child want to tell you, as opposed to having to second guess. So they're trying to do this because they're trying to spite you, or because they are like purposely want to defy you, that kind of thing. But actually, they're having a hard time, right? So if you're open, then you'll be able to pick this up. Similarly, for the child, I mean, if they are open, right, and they begin to recognize mom and dad's concern, right, as opposed to thinking that, hey, mom and dad, they're going to reject what I ever to propose again. They're going to tell me no this, no that, kind of thing, right? So that can happen if they're not open, right? Yeah. Right. But it starts with having an open mind and wanting to have that open conversation with one another, but which I know can be tough. So let's talk more about this.
Yeah, exactly. How do you actually broach the subject in a home where mental health might be a bit of a taboo subject, or people might have certain stigmas or predispositions when they discuss the issue? They don't even want to talk about it with their spouses, let alone their own children. How do you even make that first step into, talking about it, being open about it?
I think the key word here is how to take that first step. I think it's a very good question. And I think I'd like to introduce to everybody here this idea of like when you approach your child, it's always about the how, not about the what you do. Okay, and I will explain why this is the case. Like we'd like Adrian to actually show the slide on the neurodevelopments and functions of the adolescent brain, right? I'd like to share everybody a theory. Okay, there are many theories out there that actually help us understand a little bit about the young person, right? But for me, in my practice, what guides me in my work is understanding the neurological development of the young person. Why? Because it is evidence-based. It's very hard to dispute this, right? And if you say, for example, you have put an adult and a child exposed together and expose them to the same stimuli of fear, right? Different parts of the brain light up, right? For the adult and the child, very different. right? And the two parts of the brain in which you want to be concerned about as far as working young people is concerned are these two parts of the brain, which I'm going to talk about it very simplistically, right? But I'm sure you will have your own quiet time. I guess in your own time to read more, right? The two parts of the brain, one is this part called the prefrontal cortex. All right, this part of the brain is primarily responsible for decision making, planning ahead. So what that means is, like, for example, what you want to do in the future. You want to be an engineer, you want to be a pilot, thinking ahead, right? Planning ahead. Decision making, do you want to go to the McDonald's now? I mean, you eat McDonald's now, Burger King, decision making, right? Considering consequences. So if I was angry, what should I do? Should I punch? If I punch, then I might hurt somebody or I hurt myself, for example, the consequences, right? And then the other one is impulse control, right? So acting out of impulse, like for example, if dad shouted at me, and I was really, I was playing my computer and I was very engaged with my friend in this game, right? So if you're going to like plug out the socket, the power supply for me, I mean, what's going to happen? So I'm just going to react very impulsively, right? So if I don't have impulse control, then I was like start doing tantrum. And some of my clients, they will literally wreck the whole household, right? And then the whole room will be wrecked, right? So that's impulse control. Okay. So in short, the prefrontal cortex is actually the bricks. All right. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. The next part, the next slide. Okay. The key things at the bottom here, you notice, this part of the brain is actually not fully developed, all right, before the age of 25 years old. Okay. I'll leave that as it is for now. We'll come back to that. Okay. The next slide. The other part of the brain I'd like to acquaint you with is this part called the limbic system. There are actually many different parts in the limbic system. Four key areas are the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, and amygdala. Essentially, what they are about is they are the one that help us regulate our emotions. They help us tap into our memories. They help us connect meaning to incidences in our life. It also helps us to regulate our emotions. This limbic system, right, is called the seat of emotions. So that's where we are understanding the fight or flight kind of response, right, from our child, right, even for ourselves, right. That's where it's coming from. Right, and the key thing to note here is the limbic system, right, is fully operational at the onset of puberty, right? They're about the age of like 11 to 14 years old. I just to draw your attention to this difference. It talks about the difference. I would like everybody to note, parents to note, this difference between the onset, the limbic system being fully developed and the prefrontal being fully developed. Okay, there's almost a window of like 10 years apart. Okay, and you notice there's actually a range. I put on that 21 years old to 24 years old. Okay, the range is there because our brain develops a few factors that affects brain development, right? The likes of nutrition, for example. So if you were growing up and there was a lot more nutrition that goes into my body, right, the rate at which my brain will develop will be far better. I mean, it's a lot faster, right, and better compared to those who may not have a better nutritional intake in their body, right? Also, some other factors include like how stressful your environment is. So, for example, extreme case, just a really extreme case, right? If you're growing up in an environment where there's like constant violence, constant fear of your safety and well-being, that becomes something that is very stressful, right? So that does also affect the brain development, right? So all these different factors does affect the rate at which the brain develops. That's why there's a range. So sometimes, as young adults or even adults for that matter, right, we may not so easily go to our prefrontal to help us be the brakes when we are emotionally charged sometimes, right? And this is one of the reasons that we can attribute it to. Okay, but just to understand the range here. Okay. Yeah, so this window of opportunity, this gap here becomes a window of opportunity for us parents and adults to do a lot of things. But the downside to it is that it means that whatever that we teach our kids one time, two times, like be respectful to your mother, you need to manage your time well, you need to know how you need to know how to prioritize, your work and something. So the skill of knowing how to prioritize, the behavior of having to be respectful in your language, right? All these things, it must inform us that it will take time to develop, right? And in the language of neuroscience, right, we need to develop these new pathways, right, in our kids' brain for them to develop this habit of being respectful, of being able to manage the time, being able to regulate their emotions when they're sad and angry and so on and so forth. So therefore, this is the foundation, right, of us, a long way of answering your question, right, Ido? How? So because you know this, then it's always not about the what you do. That means it's not about confiscating the phone. It's not about like cutting the Wi-Fi, right? All these things is not about the what, because all these things has its place, but it's how you do it, right? So for an adolescent, if you want to unilaterally cut or remove the Wi-Fi, right, and you just take it without having to consider the limbic, right, system here, where your child is fully developed at this point in time, you're going to be having an argument with the child. It's going to be an uproar in the house, right? And because we are adults, we are fully developed in our prefrontal, right, we come in very hard and say, no, because you never listen to me, right? I give you time and time again, all these kind of things, but say, look, you're going to fail your exams. Can you hear ourselves? All these things are prefrontal narratives, prefrontal statements, all the consequences we're throwing at our kids. Right? But it's not going to work. And the more we come down hard on them from the prefrontal, the harder it is that we are going to manage them and we're going to connect with them and engage them. What they'll do is you'll be pushing them further and further away. So we want to stop that or minimize that, right? And use what I call a limbic strategy and go in with it, right? By how? By adopting limbic strategies like asking versus telling, right? So like for example, if you want to correct a behavior, instead of telling them the consequences of not stopping the behavior, you want to ask a question. Like, for example, excuse me, this is not acceptable. Do you want to carry on this? Because if you persist with this behavior, there are consequences, right? Do you want to carry on like this, right? That will be a far better approach to an adolescent compared to, can you please stop it right now, this very instance? If not, I'm going to ground you and take away your allowance. You better stop it this very instance, right? Or go to your room, right? These are very prefrontal approach that we are taking. So we call this like the positional authority, right? So we'll talk about that later, but essentially it's for the how. So we want to talk about the how to do this. We want to use limbic strategy to try whatever have pocket in our bags of tricks, right? To actually engage our child, reprimand our child, and so on and manage them. Yeah?
Right.
Okay, I'll stop there for now.
Nick, I think just now you're talking about cutting off the Wi-Fi connection to a kid. I think somebody has tampered with your Wi-Fi connectivity. So we are flitting in and out of the network. It's a bit patchy on the receiving end, but don't worry, we will just try to power through, and we ask for your forgiveness. Please bear with us. This is a work from home situation, very normal. I think everyone goes through this. So apologize for that. But Nick, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, you've raised this very good point about how there is a huge gap between the prefrontal cortex development and the full development of the limbic system, how that requires a certain form of communication with your children. But when you look at how the pandemic has lessened the amount of social interaction that's happening face to face, now it's happening online, case in point. How does that affect the development of a child? Does that, have some form of impact on the timeline that we see of this 10 years gap?
In my humble view, it does. It does affect. Because playing computer games, going onto the internet, to watch movies, what have you, right? Neuroscience informs my practice that it stimulates the limbic system and it secretes this chemical called dopamine, right? It's like the feel-good chemical in our brains, right? And it plays right into the limbic system because limbic system is primarily responsible for that whole feel-good effect, the feeling good thing plus the relational thing, that is important because if my friend was online playing, it hypes me. I want to be there with my friends, and it triggers a lot of my good memories, which is all residing in the limbic system, right? And seldom you will access the prefrontal unless you're playing games that are like strategic, for example, right? Yeah. So yeah, case in point here, like not all games are bad, right? Some games really help us to develop our prefrontal. By and large, when we play games or online, most of the time, it triggers the feel good chemical number one, and it plays right into the limbic system, right? Yeah. So I wouldn't go so far to say that it will hinder the growth of the development of the child in the limbic system or their ability to consider prefrontal facts, or have prefrontal thoughts. I wouldn't go so far to say that, because things happen around us every day very dynamically, and there will be occasions in which the prefrontal will be activated, right? In many things, like from having to go to school, having to consider having to clean a house, because it does have an impact on how clean your bed is going to be, this kind of conversations, daily conversations do happen. And it does activate the prefrontal, right? Because those little conversations and activities in the house requires us, even a young child, to go into the prefrontal, right? Yeah. So I wouldn't go so far to say that it will totally stop the growth, right? But I guess more opportunities to be provided, like intentional in an intentional way, right? To activate the prefrontal a bit more.
It also raises another interesting question that is, I think, a lot of people have on their minds now, is when you have all this online interaction, are some of them more okay than others? Because I think in our prior conversations, when we talked about gaming, I mean, not into the extreme of addiction, but when we talk about gaming, you mentioned previously that there are certain games that are strategically related and strategy related, and that can actually help a child.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there are some games in which kids play that requires them to strategize their battles, and they come together as a team, having different resources, different powers. They really need to strategize, synergize, talk to each other, talk about battle plans, talk about strategies and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I mean, there's enough research to basically back this up, where such games do assist, right, the child to go into the prefrontal to think from there, right, plan from there, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so the brain chemicals, right, the dopamine chemical that's actually secreted in our brain, right, the brain can't tell the difference whether you are taking drugs, whether in terms of when it's fired out and you feel good, right, at that point in time when you feel good, you can't tell the difference in terms of whether you are having sex, watching porn, taking drugs, playing games, cutting yourself because it feels good, that kind of thing. They just learn that it feels good. The brain learn that it feels good. That activity feels good, right? So if the child was only exposed to such activity, like for example, just cutting myself, then there's no other supervision being provided. There's no adult having to be around this child to notice this kind of inappropriate activities, right? Then the brain will think that this is something that makes you feel good. So there was no monitoring, no supervision. Then they'll keep going back to it, unless otherwise introduced to other kind of activities that make them feel good, right? To feel less stress. In our age now, I mean, like for example, they're all confined in their own room, right? So they're online, so they can go into many different sites, right, to feel pleasured, right? And if those sites were undesirable, but the dopamine chemicals they're secreted because they are utilizing those sites. Then there's no other thing that they know where to go to and what to do to feel better. Then they'll keep going back to it, right? Yeah. So these are things that you want to be mindful about, lah. And it plays right into the limbic, lah, right? Because it's not something that's very natural that they will think, oh, I watch a lot of porn. There's no consequences, because I mean they won't go into the prefrontal, they won't think of the consequences if there was any even, right? They won't go. I know of some of my clients, they will repeatedly go to sites of replicas of weapons. I've worked with clients like that, but that makes them feel good, and they always serve sites, where they're replicas of weapon, and you wonder why they do that, and they feel good. They keep going back again and again, right? Similarly with games, lah, right? Again, there's so many genres of games, right? Yeah. So if you are interested about this gaming thing, then we can come to the next session, lah. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing we wanted to talk about was this development and reaching the full development of the limbic system. Is there a difference for boys and girls?
No, not as far as literature is concerned. I mean, there are existing gender theories, for example, the difference between boys and girls. Yes, right. And that is something. It's a topic that needs to be discussed at another time, I suppose. But when we talk about brain development, there is no difference, right? Because it's the brain, right? So no, Ariel. I mean, not to my knowledge. At this point in time. Yeah, okay. But in recent weeks and months, I've actually encountered literature about the limbic system, or adults even early 30s, 40s, right? where the prefrontal is not even fully developed, and that puzzles me. Yeah. So I need to read more into that one.
And are there particular cases that you're seeing that are becoming more prevalent in the midst of a pandemic?
I mean, it's only for me, right? I've been seeing cases where there's quite a bit of self-harm, right? There's a little bit more depressive states, right? Loneliness, helplessness as well. Yeah, these are the clients, young clients that I've been working with, at least in the last 1.5 years. Yeah.
Okay. So apart from building open communication lines, and you've already addressed why that's so important, and how people should go about taking the first step in the interim before building that culture of communicating with your children, what else can parents do?
Actually, a lot. Anywhere between a school ager all the way to a young adult. So just imagine your child being very excited about whatever they know, and they want to tell you a lot of things and do a lot of things because they know a lot of stuff. Like, for example, the games, knowing about dinosaurs, knowing about how to actually play the dinosaur games. They know the name of dinosaurs. My older son is actually right smack in stage, right, where he's very industrious, right? He's basically like the expert. You tell him about anything about dinosaur, right? He will correct you from the spelling to their genes and everything else, right? They're super expert in the area, right? So just imagine if your child were actually into gaming, for example, right? He or she will be very expert in games, right? And he'll be one telling you off about things like that. Or if your child is actually into, like, say, certain, I guess, fashion, right? He or she will basically be telling very expertly about all these kind of things. But I see this is roughly about 12 years old, right? 13 years old, maybe even like 10, 11. Right? Once they enter into teenage years, right, which is actually the adolescent, right, smack in the middle, right, they suddenly become confused about every single thing they ever know, right? So to answer every question about what should we do, right, we want to be able to appreciate this reality, right, where they've been now suddenly they are exposed to so many things in the world that they are questioning from who they are, whether they know whatever they, like the dinosaurs again, right, whether they know all these things in the first place, right, is actually even necessary, and why do they even want to know all this kind of information? Even the sexuality, right, it becomes a question, right? So it becomes a very confusing phase of their life. So what parents want to do is to be able to appreciate this, and then to begin very sensitive about it, and always take the approach of being very curious, always wanting to be a learner, right, as opposed to being the expert. Because gone are the days when they enter this phase, right, where they want to listen to you and wanting to hear you tell them what is right, what's wrong anymore, because they're so confused, right, that whatever that you tell them, while it matters to them, they also value whatever that teacher says to them, whatever they have for them, right, whatever their videos taught them, whatever their material they actually dabble into, right, all these things they're being a question, true, not true, that kind of thing, and then they will compare that against whatever they have taught them, right? So the more you download, which is very natural because we are all prefrontal in terms of behavior. It's very hard for us to be limbic as adults, right? It's very difficult, for the child to appreciate where you're coming from. So we want to take really a step back.
I was just going to say that I think that's also something that's compounded, that the gap is something that's compounded by the fact that these kids are born into the internet age and they're so used to having computers or their iPads or phones, they can very easily browse whatever. So they might think that they know better. Is there a way parents can get more involved in their kids' digital lives where, I don't know, sometimes they might be shutting their parents out, they're blocking them on social media, or they want to project a different persona? Is there a way that parents can help in that regard?
All right. So the following will show all the strategies that you can use, right, among many others. And like I said, it's not about what you do. In fact, you are the expert. And I want to say that again, parents, you are the expert of what you can do. If your child are in the adolescent phase at this point in time, it's no longer a what you can do. It's about how you do it, right? Yeah. So, and also to the point of what Eva was saying, right, it's just not about the online activities, because your child is so dynamic and it's so impressionable, be interested about so many other things, and they are interested about so many other things, right? So we don't want to be too quick to jump onto like, oh, because they are always, online accounting and therefore they're really interested, on things online. Actually, it may not be the case, and often it's not the case. And sometimes we come too much naturally again, right, from the prefrontal, right, and then we jump to conclusion, which frustrates the hell out of young people because we are always constantly jumping to conclusion, right? But it's natural, right? Because we are fully developed in our prefrontal. So obviously we're always thinking ahead. And we're always trying to make certain judgment based on what we are observing, right? And because we know better based on our experience in our training and so on and so forth, right? Yeah, but we really want to take a step back. And then maybe consider one of a few of these strategies, right? I propose like 8 here, right? We're talking about praise and encouragement. Take a step back and notice what good they are doing. In the field of work that we do, right? We often say, catch them doing good. Right? What does that mean? Because it's so often we actually catch them doing bad. Hey, why you never pack your bed? Hey, how come you never study? Hey, why are you in the computer again? We always catch them doing bad things, but we seldom catch them doing good. Right? Hey, today you helped bring all the fork and spoons to the dining table. Hey, so simple also, but we never catch them doing good, right? But we want to actually point it out. Right? You actually came back early today. Wow. I appreciate that, girl or son, this is something that seldom happen, but you notice that actually, they actually came back a lot earlier. So you want to highlight that, so catch them doing good. Even at the early stage of the development of this catching them doing good strategy in our field of work, right? There's a whole school that was actually created in Singapore, right? To actually just take that approach of catching them doing good. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the school, Northlight, right? So I think Northlight is somewhere in Balestier now at this point in time. When Northlight was first started, right, when we were going there as trainers and consultants, right, the principal then will set up the school, right, put like cameras around the school, right, to do exactly that, catch students doing good, and then make a big deal out of the students, right, behaving well. Like for example, walking up and down the staircase, right, on the left side of the yellow line, like the yellow line going up the staircase, for example, about students having to like tuck in their shirt. They really literally catch them doing good and make a big deal out of this whole thing, right? Even in class or even on stage for that matter. So we use things like praise and encouragement. So praise is like good job, well done. But that has no meaning until you add in the encouragement. Meaning, hey, son, that was really good. I really appreciated the fact you took the initiative, right, to bring the utensils onto the table for dinner for all of us. But you hung around earlier as well, and then you were offered, right, to wash the dishes. I really appreciate that. And that really helped my mom. Today she really had a hard day. So because you notice all this, and then you make a point to articulate what exactly happened, and then you contextualize there, the child learns, right? And that makes a whole lot of a difference, right?
Yeah. Right. So this would be
that's
an
one.
example.
So that's praise versus encouragement.
Right. That would be an example of connecting with the limbic system, yeah? Because we have some questions in our chat. I think Michelle Yong is asking, how do we connect with that limbic system if we shouldn't speak the prefrontal language because it is ineffective? And some similar question from David who's asking, can we get more examples of limbic versus prefrontal language with regards to engagement framework and strategies? So I think they want to have very concrete examples of what they can do to really tap in on that limbic system. Go ahead and give us some of that.
It will help parents or those who are listening in, right? If you could also add in, right, like say, this is what's happening between me and my child, right? This is what I did. What would you say? What would you propose that we do differently? Okay, if you could assist with that, that would be good. But if otherwise, I will just be basically using my examples. Otherwise, it'll be more meaningful. Like if you can highlight your situation. Okay. So I'll give you a very typical example that I always work with parents. They always struggle with this, right? Like they are always playing computer games, right? And then when you ask them to actually stop playing the computer games, right, they have a long litany of like reasons like that they will not basically get off the computer, right? So being a fully limbic person, young person, right? If you are trying to get them off the computer at that point in time, what are your chances of getting them off the computer at that point in time? Almost zero. Okay, almost zero. That doesn't burn them up, okay, because they are right. And at the same time, if you are trying to be limbic, and there are a lot of books that shows you about that, and I highlighted. I'm not sure whether the team is going to actually share with you this ebook that I actually wrote. But anyway, there's actually a retired NIE professor who actually, in her close to retiring years, went into studying gamer behaviors, and then she went to gaming herself, right? And in part of her whole project of studying game behavior, right, she chanced upon this gamer whereby the parents are trying to get him out, right, of the behavior. But what he did was that the parent did was actually going down there and start yelling at the child. And as the father keep yelling at the child keep yelling back at the father, right? And the whole situation escalates. This is limbic versus limbic. I quickly let's say first, will always lose, right? If the parent enter into the limbic, if parent is limbic emotional, the child is limbic, the parent will always lose. Okay. So anyway, I'll come back to this in a while. So escalate to a point where the father will have to go all the way to the power point and yank the power plug up, and and obviously the game stopped, right? And then after that, they went into a fight. So the point here is that when that escalates, right, parent always lose. Why? Because now you try to revisit this conversation, it will be a very difficult conversation to revisit. And also, if you try to implement certain boundaries, you will not get any buy-in from the child. What the adult is doing here, the parent is doing here, right, is asserting the prefrontal strategies are so much to a point where there is little consideration to the limbic feelings where the child is coming from, right? So at that point in time, you don't want to engage, okay? So how do you really want to engage them and to really stop all this behavior, right, is to really engage them after or before. Right, and if you know, because we are leveraging on our prefrontal, we know that they are going to pass on on you, or they're going to give you 1,001 excuses already. Later on I will actually stop that kind of thing, right? But actually they never stop, and and you expect this really, right? You want to actually have those conversations prior to them having to go online, right? And say, hey, so how you want to play online? How long do you intend to actually play with your friends today? What games are you playing? Right? Because they really want to play, right? They will tell you everything. This is when I tell you, right, your disposition has to be one of a learner and very curious. So I'm interested to know how long are you playing, who are you playing with? Okay. So now it's already about 9 o'clock, right? So how long do you need to play? Okay, what happens if you pass midnight? What are you prepared to do? Right, okay. So you hear your child say all this nothing. Okay. So what happens if it doesn't get executed? So you tell me, say, okay, you will stop by midnight. But if you don't stop by midnight, then I as your parent am allowed to basically cut the Wi-Fi. Is that all? Okay, sure. Okay. So you let it go. This is all using all the limbic strategies already, because I'm asking all the I'm using all the asking. Who are your friends? Who are you playing your friends? I see. Oh, okay, you're playing so and so. Okay. That's good fun. Okay. What happens if I find that this is something not adhere to based on what you are telling me that you will do? Okay. So all these are limbic strategies, and then you let it go. So after you let it go already, right? You need to expect that they won't follow through it, right? But some do, right? Especially if you actually remember the window, the 10-year window, right? If you follow through enough, often enough, there's repetition to it, neural pathways get formed, right? Some kids do learn and they will stop, or they will keep to whatever they say they will do. But if they don't, then you want to let it go, right? Because no point, right? Because at the point in time they're playing, no point, right? Execute as agreed. So if your agreement was by midnight, never stop playing, right? You execute You make sure you actually shut off the Wi-Fi, right? But if that's not the case and you go past, you let it go. You just go and sleep. But tomorrow, no allowance, because that was the agreement, right? Or you don't get to go out.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, and you need to be really consistent with this. Yeah.
Right. Nick, just to kind of wrap things up a bit, because I have some questions for you before we open it to everyone that's part of the webinar today. You spoke a lot about how we can help our children, but I'd like to find out more about how we can help ourselves as well. How do we not convey the stresses that we face, whether in everyday life or especially in a pandemic? How do we not, send it over to our kids, and how do we make sure that we are sane and stress light? I won't want to say stress-free, stress light, if that's even possible. What sort of mindfulness and communication methods are there, and what sort of resources are available?
That's a challenge. That's a hard one actually, because neuroscience informs us, right? When we reach a certain stage in our lives, at the end of the day, it's a bit hard to change our behaviors, right? Because the neural pathway has been formed already. So that's challenging. But nonetheless, it's not impossible, right? So you ask what? I think we want to be able to take a step back and spend time doing the things that we like to do. I stop myself, from saying that because in this situation, it's very difficult, to basically find time for ourselves and to do things that we really want to have some space to breathe. Like date nights, it's a bit difficult already. And who's going to do after the kids? Very difficult across households. Maybe a run, just a walk. But if you can do it with your kids, I think that'll be better. I think it'll be very strongly encouraged. In fact, they will like it a lot more. And this becomes an opportunity for you to build that bond as well, and to just really, when they say hang out and waste time with them. Some of them it's a waste time because I can spend my time, replying emails, in that sense, waste time because as opposed to having to spend time replying, important emails. You just hang out with them and they are doing all kinds of fun stuff to them, right? Not so meaningful for you, but it's really, in that sense, wasting time. Right? So that could be helpful. And use this opportunity to wind down a little bit. Effective communication takes place within the relationship. So therefore, when you waste time with them, that helps not only your mental health, but it also builds up the relationship with them, right? And communication happens, right? And you want to build this thing called relationship. And it's not the relationship in the broad sense of the word. In the context of our discussion today, right, let me introduce you very quickly, right, to two ideas where this relationship is concerned, right? We want to be able to have positional authority and influential authority, right? With adolescents, you want to have both, but more of the influential authority. What that basically means is this. If you say, I'm your father, listen to me, how dare you shut the door at me? You come back here, stop being so rude, like prefrontal, but you're asserting positional authority. If they listen to you with no relationship whatsoever or no influential authority, right, they will just listen to you only because you are my father, right? Or in a community context, you are the leader, and because by virtue of the fact that you are the leader, right, I'll listen to you. As opposed to influential authority, basically, whatever that you say matters. There is a bond, there is a deep understanding between each other. So therefore, if you tell me, say, hey, come here, that wasn't very respectful of you, right? You just slam your door. I am just asking very simply, why are you playing so many games in the country? Just stop. Come here this instant, please. Is it okay? So you are asserting, and how it's being said is very different. If you hear my tone, it's very different when you assert influential authority as opposed to a positional authority. It's very different. So that's key. Okay, that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is that as you relate to young people, it is not so logic-based. It's often feeling-based. So therefore, how do you help yourself, right? Mentally is to basically, I guess, get into your limbic space a bit more and that kind of help you to be less stressed as well, right? The likes of having to do yoga, listening to music, doing a bit of artwork, doing a little bit of writing, just express it out a little bit, and that plays into the limbic, and it helps you to also connect with your kids because they are actually, by nature, they are not limbic, they're not prefrontal, they're very limbic. So if you give yourself that opportunity to go into your limbic space a little bit, that will help you to be less stressed, but it also naturally helps you connect with your child a little more. Next one, strategy number three, resist the urge to nag. Instead, listen, right? Yeah. So I guess we want to find some time also to cut yourself some slack in terms of always thinking of the consequences. I need to always make sure I need to bring back money. How to bring back money? I'm not spending time with my family enough. I worry this, I worry that accounting. All these kind of things, right? It's activating your prefrontal quite a lot, right? And because of that, right, there's a high tendency for you to want to, in the words of teens, young people, my mom always nag. Because say one time not enough, must say 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 times, right? Yeah. So natural about that. So we're all guilty of that, right? So in our field of work, right, all the practitioners, we are very familiar with this line. Anything you say more than one to young people, right, is a nag already. Anything more than once, you say, right, it's already more than that. So how then can you help them to be reminded? Because Nick, you say, right, prefrontal, the neural pathway needs to be formed, need repetition, right? You need to do it again and again, and you got this 10-year period, right? So repetition is important, but I say one time, two times, cannot, man. How come now you become a nag? Right? It's not like saying every other second, every other minute, you say the same thing. Now you tell me at the dining room, after that I go into my room, you tell me the same thing, that my clothes is on the floor, I'm not putting in my laundry. Then after that, I finish my shower again, after I go outside and watch TV, you remind me again about my laundry, that kind of thing. You're doing it in less than half an hour, 1 hour. Obviously, you're a nag, right? Or even playing computer games, You tell me during dinner, then after during shower time, so you tell me my computer, then after that, before I start playing a computer game, you also say to me again, wow, cannot lah. Right? Yeah. So that's why we're talking about the nag. So we want to pace it out. right? Like once you say it, let it go, don't say it already until maybe 1 week later. Observe, then 3 weeks later, 1 month later, 1 week later.
Really got to resist the urge to nag. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next strategy 4 would be understand the place of drama. So remember I was telling you the right smack in between, right? From the industry stage, right, all the way into this identity stage, right? Wow, it's super drama, okay? Super drama. So all kinds of things also got issue. All kinds of things got issue. Right? That's what I mean by place of drama in the kid's life. So don't overreact or respond too quickly because it's just drama. It's just limbic. It's just reactive. Differentiate the purpose of it from what you see. That means why are they acting like that? The meaning, you differentiate from the behavior. Okay. And finally, the last one, actually got 2 more. Okay. Play the role of a learner. I talked about this already earlier. Always be the curious learner. And then the strategy number 6 is avoid the power struggle. I also talked about this already. Okay. In the context of helping ourselves, that means we want to basically learn to appreciate what's in your control and what's not in your control. Right? And what's in your control is their developmental stage. How they choose to think, quote unquote, right, is something that they cannot control and you also cannot control. But what you can control is your thinking and your behavior, right? So if you want to choose to always assert your position of authority, then you assert. Then when your child reacts, right, which you cannot control, right, then they will avoid you. But the more you assert your position of authority, then you lose that connection, you lose that respect, right? Even that opportunity to even talk to them.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that helps.
That is very helpful. Some very, very useful tips there. But on top of that, Nick, I was just wondering, now with social distancing the norm, parents might have less support, that they used to get from the schools, from their neighborhoods or churches even, or other family members. What are some of the resources that you can share with us? It might be quite an isolating experience for parents who don't have the typical support networks that they might have had in the past.
Those of you who require this information, I guess FES would be a good place, right? I mean, the little I know about FES, they basically do upstream work, right? So those of you who are in that space will require a bit training, FES or its like would be a good place to reach out to and find more information. Otherwise, more interventive, I suppose, in terms of help that you need. I'd like to introduce to you all this term called the Family Service Centers, right? That's put together by our government or National Council of Social Services, and they overlook all this across the island, everywhere. But they only operate via district area. So, for example, if you're staying in Choa Chu Kang, for example, in a certain block, you cannot go all the way to maybe like Bukit Panjang or Bukit Batok, the Family Service Center, there to ask for help. There's one nearest to you. Okay, so how do you know which is nearest to you? Right, so you go to the Ministry of Social and Family Development website, and then you search for Family Service Center, and then there's this box that tells you key in the postal code. So all you need to do is just key in your postal code, and then the website will just churn for you the nearest Family Service Centers that you want to reach out to. Right, and they have a whole suite of support that they can provide you, from financial assistance to counseling to shelter, to food even, right? And certain activities that can engage yourself and also your child, depending on what the issues are, right? So that's the Family Service Centers. But on top of that, there's also all the other, they call it the social service agencies, right? The likes of Touch Community, the likes of Care Corner, Family Service Centers, the likes of Caritas and all its affiliates, all these are known across the island that you can actually reach out to for help. And don't be afraid to ask for help, really, because there's a lot of resources, especially in the last 1.5 years, 2 years. Lots of resources, from not just money, by the way, right? A lot of other things, right? From kids tuition to, even food, clothing.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the key takeaway is, don't feel alone about this. It is a village and we're all in it together, trying to help each other. Okay, Nick, thank you so much for sharing your insights, both as a professional psychologist as well as a father of 3. We are going to wrap things up for the first half of this webinar now, and the second half will consist mainly of the questions that we'll take from our participants. There are so many burning questions. We'll try to get through all of them. We're going to take a short break now. I'm going to hand things over to Nick Lee. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick Lim. Don't go away. We are going to come back with answers to the questions that you have left in the chat. For those of you who have questions, please add them to the chat, and we will try to address as many of them as possible. Just a quick note about while we are looking through the questions about FES. If you want more information, please go to our website. We also have a Facebook page with material content relating to family parenting. And as I mentioned earlier, FES is a non-profit registered charity, and we do rely on donations to help make things happen. All of us are volunteers. We don't get paid, right? And so if you do believe in the work and that really actually family education is important, we would appreciate it if you could make a small donation. It doesn't really matter how much, because there's over 100 of you here. Even if you put in $5, it will go a long way towards helping FES continue these programs. So, for some of you joined us last year when we had Dads Matter, we engaged Mike Hall from Texas to conduct, I think in total it was maybe 8 or 9 webinars for us, right? And all those things cost money, right? So if you can, please, we would really appreciate it if you could make a donation. You can do it via QR code, or if you want to do it by PayNow, the UEN number is there. Any amount really will be appreciated. Doesn't matter, $5 is fine. If you feel compelled to donate 500, also okay. But we are equally thankful to the $5 donation as well as the $500 donation.
But I want to get to this question because I think this relates to identifying if there is a problem, that parents should be concerned about. This question from David Ng. Question on extreme behavior. Isn't sleeping late, irritability, closing doors, etc., typical of teenage behavior? Should we be concerned if we see these behaviors? So how do you differentiate between regular teen angst and something that is more worrying?
I go back to the point I said earlier, parents should know it better. From a developmental point of view, when your kids are actually at the adolescent stage, right? I mean, privacy is important. They need their space, right? So that much you want to accord them, that I call it developmental space. But whether it means having to close the door, lock the door or not, this is something that as a household, as parents, you want to make and different household has different tolerance as to what's allowable, right? That's something that should be the right of the parents, right? The head of the house, the two heads of the household, they should make those kind of decisions. But coming from a development point of view, growing child like them need to have their own space, right? Even to a point where, for example, if you have like brothers and sisters, you want to allow the girls to have their own space and the boys to have their own space, right? If it means having their own room by themselves, I mean, it's something that that can be accorded, right? Why not? Right? Space in that sense. So I'm just talking concrete terms, right? Sometimes even you're staying in the same room for that matter. I mean, you can have your own space, your own cupboard, your own mattress here and there, that kind of thing, right? Those are important, yeah. But how you go about doing it, there's no like a Bible saying, like the rule book that
right.
That says must do this, must do that.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Another question from Vic Chia, who asks, how would you handle kids with ADHD or those who constantly seek attention from parents, especially when they constantly scream and yell at each other, even over trivial stuff?
I hope first and foremost you begin to read and understand a bit more about this condition, ADHD, right? I mean, they by nature, with kids with this condition generally require a certain amount of attention and space, right? So because of the need for that natural attention, right? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? So sometimes attention deficit, sometimes hyperactivity, sometimes both. We want to be able to provide the opportunity for them to be able to be hyperactive. But when they are deficit in their attention and they're not with you and they're not focused, then we want to provide them the opportunity to learn how to be focused, right? I know there are interventions. Practitioners will use, electrical waves kind of thing, right, to intervene at the brain level for them to basically help the child focus, right, on some activity that is actually being played out in the iPad, right? And they have certain protocol to actually follow this. Right? So those kind of interventions may help, right? Otherwise, they become some other activities haven't focused. Right? So, but bear in mind, while the condition is there, but they are still naturally limbic responders. They are still adolescents. Right. So when you engage them, right, you need to be mindful that they are still teenagers, right? So they are thinking, again, quote unquote, naturally from their limbic. So therefore, when you want to manage them, when you want to reprimand them, or you want to discipline them, you want to be mindful of how you, and hopefully you consider the limbic approach as opposed to the prefrontal.
Okay.
Right?
We have questions relating to body image issues in teens, especially. I think I'll give this to you concurrently because they seem to overlap. Lisa C asks, how do we handle a teenager with image issues who hates his looks? Catherine K asks, I have a niece in Sec 2 in a girls' school who has body image issues. She locks herself in the toilet after school every day and cries, saying her thighs are too big, even though we think she is too skinny. How do we reach out to her?
Very important question. These are all symptomatic or something underlying, right? When I say symptomatic, basically means that if I was worried about how people see me, I worry about my self-image. These are telling signs of there's something more important that the child is seeking for. That needs to be attended to. That is not being attended to. That's not being intervened. There's not much attention being paid towards those needs that's underlying. Therefore, it comes out and manifests itself in I don't look too good. I actually get berated quite a bit because of my looks. I look a little bit too flat on my thigh and so on and so forth. Right? We want to find a way to engage them in a conversation about why they feel that their thighs are too big. How come my look is actually not so good? And what does that have an impact on me in the context of me being with my friends or being in a social environment and so on and so forth. Right? Have that conversation with the child. And it can be quite challenging. So get the help of some professionals to work with you on this one. And at home, what you can do is to remember the strategy of telling about the encouraging versus affirming one, right? The praises versus the encouragement, right? Catching them doing good. These are some things that you want to start doing with them to make a big deal with them and do it sincerely and honestly, okay? About what about them that you value about. Be honest, because if you're not, then they know, and to every step of the way, let them know that regardless of how they look, they are the most valued in your life, and you matter so much to them, right? And constantly do that, right? But with the help, so do that concurrently with the professionals, because these are all like complex issues. Okay, yeah.
Right. There's another question from SWT. I think this is a follow-up question to what you were advising earlier regarding open communication. SWT asks, what do you say or how do you encourage a 13 or 14-year-old teen to practice delayed gratification, for example, playing games after exams have ended, and to focus on revising for the upcoming exam? After having open communication with him, should we still let it go and let him face the consequences himself?
Oh yes, totally concur, right? Let them face the consequences. Boundaries are important for them. Still, I've met parents who like, I do not do them already, right? Everything goes, and then now no boundaries. Oh my gosh, no. You can't allow that. The boundaries still needs to be there. But I think the boundaries have to be wider in such a way that they can play within this boundary or this field. They can play and run around everything. They can make mistakes there. They can fall down, they can get injured and everything else, but still within acceptable boundaries, right? So it is important. And again, let me reiterate how you set those boundaries. It's how you engage them by asking them questions, getting them to tell you as opposed to you telling them, or you unilaterally taking action without them even knowing, right? Or without even consultation with them, right? So it's really important that we consider them when you make certain disciplinary actions. Yeah, they would very much like you to have them in mind when you do those things. Yeah, there was something that I think I missed out.
with
you answer the
regards to
question?
the question,
Yeah.
whether you should let him face the consequences themselves, you concurred with that, right? How to get the person to
Yes.
focus for the upcoming exam, that's another one. How do you get children or teens to focus?
Yeah, so remember the 10-year window, huh? So the 10-year window basically means that before the exam, right? Hey, think ahead, what you want to do? You want to go science stream, art stream, or you want to go JC, poly, university, what you want to do, right? All this talk already, many times over already. Talk until you don't talk already, right? Yeah, but how come you still not study? How come you still play computer game, right? That kind of thing, right? Yeah, because they're all limbic nature, right? So if at that point in time, they say, my friend show me go this, do this, got that kind of thing, right? Then obviously they want to go, right? But that doesn't mean they forget about what you talk about, lah. So therefore, you need to come in and give them a hand. Right? Hey, hello, you been on the computer like what, 8 hours a day? No, I mean, you question, limbic strategy, you not worried, pretend, right? I mean, you ask a question, right? Instead of telling, go and study now, go. Instead of like forcing it down on them, right? You don't do anything about it now, is it?
It's very funny because I'm recognizing a lot of the parenting methods that my own parents used in the examples that you're giving. But it ties into our question from Irene San. Is it too late to change if a teenager is already used to old habits and has not cultivated the right ones?
No, actually, it's very fun time now. The idea of being a limbic responder, right? Novelty goes a long way. So although they are very used to all the things they've been doing, right, now it's a good time, right, for you to every other week, you can change your strategy. It'll be very exciting for them, right? And novelty will go a long way. Like if you could, like, today I scold you by telling you off in your face. The next day I will scold you and tell you over a cup of ice cream. Another day I will actually drive you to school and I will actually say that you are a terrible brother or son because you are actually doing all these kind of things, right? So my context of disciplining changes every other time. That will be so exciting for them because they are limbic responders, right? So if every opportunity you have to make it so unique for them to basically learn a particular lesson, right, that will be awesome, right? Because they are by nature limbic responder. So if so to the point of like they're already so used to this way, right? Then and it's not working if you continue doing this, then why keep doing it? And all of us parents keep doing it, they keep guilty, they're so guilty of like repeating the same strategy that we've been doing with them for the past like donkey years, then 10, 12, 15, 20 years, and then still thinking that it will work, but it's not going to work. And the more you do the same thing, the more they get resentful, the more they get like fed up with you, and now after a while they stop talking to you. Why? Because we as adults, we go into our own repetitive mode, blindsided by what they are thinking, what they are feeling at that point in time, because the limbic responders are constantly changing. Every second they are captivated by something, they will change their mind already, or they'll do something else already, that kind of thing, right? So we can never catch up, but it plays to our advantage. And we want to try to discipline them, we want to try to teach them something meaningful, right? We tell them stories. Stories are very good limbic strategies, right? We give them anecdotal examples about how you learned a very valuable lesson. To teach them a lesson. Very good limbic strategies. Right? These are ways you can actually go about doing it.
Well, what's a limbic strategy for communicating with a child to help them plan their time? This question from Eileen, who has a child who is in Sec 3, or is asking on behalf of someone who has a child in Sec 3.
So to engage them limbic first, we ask them a question of like something that really excites them, something that they aspire to become or have an ambition to work towards to. Right? If you start from that point, then you're playing right into the limbic, because to them, it brings excitement, it brings thrill, maybe it brings hope even, right? Yeah. So start from that space. Okay. So once you establish that and say, okay, so if that was the case, right, then what would you like, to do to manage your time? Because and then you be very factual with them about maybe they are not basically clocking enough hours to cover chapters, for example, right? And then be very concrete with them about the runway towards the exam dates. Right? All these things are boundaries that you set for them, and you walk them through those things, right? So you say, okay, I mean, you what do you want to know from me? How to manage my time? Hopefully, they're asking you to help them manage time, but not you telling them that you need to manage your time. Okay. Yeah. So if you could throw it back to them and say, hey, do you think you need some time management, or you need to learn some time management? I mean, I'm just thinking, son, look at it this way. You try so hard but your maths, you still like what, 60, 55. What have you been doing? Oh, I've been doing this. But you've been doing this for the past like what, 4, 5 tests already, but still like that. Do you think this is something that is like you want to keep doing it? That kind of thing. So you ask, you always throw it back there and get them to tell you, and the reason why you want to get them to tell you is that so that they own it, you see. Right? Yeah. So you ask them the questions, and then you propose to them, say, how about if you consider managing your time by using, say, maybe your iPhone? Have you tried that? Or would it help if you had timetable? You know, like the school timetable that they actually use and they actually show you all your class timing and everything. Would you think that this is something that it would be useful for you? Right? All these we as parents know lah. But what we're trying to do here in asking those questions and citing those examples, and we are asking as opposed to telling them, right, is trying to get them to create these neural pathways between the limbic and the prefrontal. The more questions you ask in that manner, you are forcing them to move from the limbic to a prefrontal. Why limbic? Is because they are already excited. They want to actually go to the best GC. You know, they want to basically be on American Got Talent, for example. That excites them. So your starting point very good already. You already score point there already in the brain already. So now how do you get there? Right? This is your timeline. This is what you have been doing. This is your limitations. What do you think you need to do to actually get yourself there? So you literally force them to think from the prefrontal. And then you literally come out with a plan, and okay, so this is basically it. This is basically your strategy. Okay, let's follow. Once they have that plan already, right, and they've already gotten it already, right, you need to be prepared, right, that you need to always reference them back to this, right, and actually literally like journey with them, right, through maybe that 3 months leading up to the exam. You know, even post that, maybe they graduate already, moving from really Sec 4 to like JC already, for example. Now, but keeping the ambition still inside, you know, do you want to reference back to this one again? You want to ask the same questions to them. So how is this still workable for you? Right. So you're forcing them to go into the prefrontal. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Along the way, you must expect there are a lot of like distractions.
Okay. Nick, just to satisfy my own curiosity and drawing from my experience as a teen, which admittedly was a while ago, you know, when you have these parents using these psych methods on you, does that make a child or a teenager resent because they know, oh, my parent is using a method on me, or they're trying to school me, or they think they know better? You know, does that cause some form of resentment in the child? They resent that instruction, and you know, all the more they want to rebel after that.
Will you feel cheated if I tell you won't know?
I guess. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, so the adults is in a better position to make a call like that as to whether or not to use a limbic strategy or prefrontal strategy. But because the child is primarily from a limbic point of view, anything you give to them that will excite them, they will go with it, you know. Yeah. So we are, as the adult now, as parents who are concerned for their well-being, right, we want to develop the prefrontal as soon as possible. But we need to be patient with them because it's not something that you can force. Because all the other factors I was talking about, right, in order for the brain to develop that prefrontal, a lot of things must happen, right? From nutrition to, you know, the opportunity to activate the executive functions in the brain, you know, to move left-right hemisphere engagement in the brain, so on and so forth. All these things need to be available. So everybody grows at different rate, right? So to expect the child to basically think like the adult, the parent, it's impossible. And sometimes I hear parents say, like, can't you understand where I'm coming from? You know, I have to work this, I have to work. You know, I come back here, I got to do this, I got to do something. Then after that, the child will say, there we go again. There we go. That one thing they can say. But what we are trying to do is to get them to see where we are coming from, right? But it's a far-fetched, you know. It's near to impossible, right? Yeah, but so they will just capture all those things. And bear in mind, because they're limbic responders, if you do it too often, it goes into the memory part of the limbic system. Remember, limbic system, there's also the hard disk. That's where the memory gets stored, good and bad. So when this becomes too prolonged and resentment builds, the memory get attached to the meaning, which is also in the limbic system, right? When that is collectively, you know, engaged all together, right? Then you build remembrance, recollection, right, of not so nice moments in my growing up years. And sometimes resentment can build and accumulate, right, into later years, right? And then we know the story goes, right? Yeah.
Okay, I think we have about 5 to 7 minutes more, so we'll take maybe 3 or 4 more questions. This one is, I think, in your wheelhouse because it's related to online activity. Aid Sim asks, how do you motivate a 14-year-old fixated on his laptop/phone, totally obsessed with watching YouTube videos and vampire stories? Praises and encouragements work for only 5 minutes before the kid goes back to his videos, even after being punished.
I think similar to the one we talked about in terms of the engagement gaming online, right? At the end of the day, when the child is ready, computer in front of him ready or her, fully watching the video already, you try to do anything, not possible. If you go down there, you literally yank the whole laptop away, and you are emotional, the child is emotional, also lose, right? Lose ma, right? Unless you intentionally, for example, say, okay, look, my hand is on your laptop right now. We talked about this before. I give you another take it back. How long more you want? How long more would you like to be on this? I'm only allowing 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? After which I'm going to remove your computer. Okay, whether you like it or not, cry all you want, throw your tantrum all you want, I'm going to take it. Right? And this is an agreement made before he started going on the computer, right? And you just need to execute it, right? And again, it's not about what you do, right? It's about how you execute it. And if it was agreed prior to that, and it was something that they propose more than what you propose, and you or even if you meet them halfway, you need to execute it, right? And this thing called in psychology, right? There's negatively reinforcement or negatively reinforcing a behavior, right? What that means is this: if you say that you do certain things but you don't do, you're negatively reinforcing the behavior that he or she can continue watching the Korean movie in the computer on the computer, negatively reinforcing the behavior, right? So so the reverse is this, right? Positive behavior. So if I want you to always do the good thing, right? Oh, you're very good, you always call Zhe, right? Or okay, I give you sweet. Oh, wow, very good, very good. Then I'll call you Zhe. I positively reinforce you. But the negative reinforcing you is that if I want you to stop doing something, in this case, like the computer, watching the thing, right? Watching the Korean movie, whatever it is, I want you to stop. But to stop the agreement is to basically remove the whole computer, right? But I'm not. I'm allowing it to go, right? So the behavior is that I want you to stop. But by letting it go, you're actually not stopping, You're actually letting the child continue to watch. So by right now, you are negatively reinforcing the behavior for me to continue watching the non-verbal behaviors of yours. So to counter that, right, you need to basically ensure that whatever that you say that you do, you follow through. And you are consistent with it, not just in this one occasion, but in other occasions as well. Right? Yeah. And this one, sometimes our kids are very smart to play their parents now. Either that or play one parent against the other. Oh, daddy never say, or mommy could say. Then you're in trouble. Right? And they say, kind of snoop, right? Yeah. So if mom and dad they're not in communication, then problem more, they say jalat already, no? Yeah.
Okay, actually, there are quite a few more good questions, so I'll try to slip as many in as I can. This one from Audrey and Justin. How would you deal with a 12-year-old who does not want to sleep on his own? He still wants to sleep in the same bedroom as his parents.
Systematically make adjustment, right? When I say that, what does it mean? It means that does the child have his or her own room, for example, right? So the closer parent to the child sleep with the child in the child's room, right? For over a period of time, right? Until such time that the child can sleep on his or her own, systematically. If it means having both parents to sleep in the child's room, then do that. Until the child sleeps already, then the both parents go back to their own sleep. So systematically. So that's how you condition the behavior.
Wow.
So this is a good example of positive reinforcement. Because the child feels, I cannot sleep without my parents, ma. You want the child to be away from the parents' room, ma. So the end place is actually the child's own room. But the child cannot deal without the parents. So you just deal with the room first, in this case. So you bring the child to his or her room. Yeah, then you slowly remove everything else, right? Bit by bit. So you got to go with the child's, I guess, comfort and safety level. Meaning to say that if the child becomes too highly anxious when the parents leave the room and start to cry and want to go back and something, then becomes too anxious already. So you want to minimize the anxiousness of the child.
Okay.
And slowly move the child, move yourself away from the child, and allow the child to be totally on his or her own in the room. It will take a while. Say like that very easy, but usually it will take weeks, months, maybe even sometimes years. Right? It depends on the readiness of the child, how they feel safe and secure.
Okay. So it sounds like Audrey and Justin will have to give up their beds for a while, all for the sake of their kid, right? I think we're going to ask one or two final questions. I'm just going to take these two together. Angela asked, how can we help our children to be resilient in life and not give up easily whenever they fail or receive hurtful comments from classmates, etc.? And if you could just answer that to the frame of what Olivia Quay is asking, the approaches that you yourself practice with your 3 kids, and how have those approaches helped your relationships with them?
We do role plays. Literally in our house, we do role plays, and we will cite examples like their friends calling them names. So we use their names, and then you'll say that, hey, what if your child, your friend call you all these names, right? What do you do? Then my wife and I will basically be the mocker, right? Using their name and twisting and turning their names, right? Then they need to basically retaliate in their own words. And at least now, because we are role playing, right, we can tell them what's allowable and what's not allowable in terms of their retaliation. So my boy one day also said, I'll punch the fella, that kind of thing, right? I'll just kick the kind of thing. I'll say, okay, fine. So I, being a father, right, but mom totally disapprove of this, right? I say, okay, fine, you punch the boy, right? How far will you punch the boy? Right? How far will you go with the fight with the boy? That kind of thing, right? Yeah. So herein lies the part also, what's allowable for the dad, it may not be allowable for the mother in terms of the tolerance, especially it was boys or girls. I mean, different. That's what I do in my household. We practice that. Sometimes we also use case studies, like using case studies in the context of what we have spoke about. So, for example, our household have this understanding, right, that naughty words are not allowable. Or naughty words equivalent to things like stupid, shit, that kind of thing, right? Because I have 3 kids, right, they are supposed to be like the police of each other. And our label, the understanding is like we need to help each other, protect each other. So that's the language that I use with the kids. So we in a way to encourage them looking out for each other. Either they say it to each other or they say it to other people. So if they go out and play and they start hearing, if they themselves say it, then I know that the other sibling will catch one of my child saying it. If not, right, if they hear their neighbor saying it, right, they'll bring it back to a discussion and say, hey, Dad, this now John said this, he said, wow, sometimes it's quite vulgar. Then I said, wow, okay, who said that? I see. Do you know what it means? Limbic strategy, right? Because they're also very young, close adolescents now. So do you know what it means? Oh, okay. Looks like your understanding is not so accurate. They did explain to you, okay? And this brings to the part about us again, right? Because once our words on a certain topic that you're like, whoa, be it sexuality, be it gangs, be whatever it is, right? You must be prepared to take the question. You must be prepared to take all those like taboo topics, taboo discussion, right? Yeah. So that's all. That's why openness also allows that to happen. So in this case, vulgarity, right? Like they're so young. I mean, they're already hearing the neighbors saying these kind of things. Like then I need to explain to them all the Hokkien vulgarities, then even the Tamil vulgarities, that kind of thing, right? It's like, oh my God, I literally had to say as it is, right? And to help them appreciate the fact that this is what it means. So can you imagine if this was said and this is what it means? How would you feel? Limbic strategy. How would you feel? And if this was your meme or if this your mommy, how does it feel? Right? And that will connect a lot better because it's limbic, So, but if I tell them, say, next time this what will happen to you? If you continue to do this, you go to jail or you join this thing called gang. You see, so informative, so prefrontal, they will not get it. Confirm will not get it. Right? Yeah. So
they can't
I hope that helps.
Yet.
No, they can't.
Okay.
So the more relational it is, the more emotive it is, the better it's. The more positive it is, less negative. That means that they're not angry or they're not like upset or anything, right? It will stick better. Right? Yeah.
I know I said that it will be the last question, but we want to get more bang for our buck or time since this expert is here. FOC. So we're going to make as much use, going to squeeze a few more questions out of you. This one is, how do we identify if a behavior is due to mental stress, or is it just a typical phase as the child grows older? For example, refusal to do homework or study. And I think in relation to this, is setting results, goal, and rewards a good idea to motivate lower primary kids? If the results are not achieved, what should parents do to comfort them? How to regain confidence after disappointment?
Correct. So I will say it again, and I said it right at the beginning of our session this evening, right? Two things.
Yeah.
If it's extreme, something is up. That's number one. Number two is out of the norm, something is up. Right? These are your two, I guess, palpable, hopefully, lessons that you take with you to know, whether something is up, where mental health is concerned, right? And parents are in the best position to actually pick that up. But mindful of the fact of that, all of us are actually super stressed, even myself, right? I mean, you can imagine yourself every other day, meetings after meetings on Zoom, then HBL even worse, because all five of them are actually all on the devices, and then it's really a madhouse to actually get all the devices up at different times, even if it's simultaneously, it's even worse, okay? So all these things can be very tough. I can appreciate the reality, but if we lose it, we lose it, lah, right? I mean, don't be too hard on yourself, really, because we're just humans at the end of the day. But when we get an opportunity to take a step back and then to have the opportunity to like fishbowl the whole situation, I think this is something that you want to try to pick up at the very minimum, right? Extremities and out of the normality, right? And hopefully it sticks with you, right? And then don't take everything upon yourself as well, because sometimes it's just beyond you to be able to address these abnormalities or these extremities, right? I mean, my 11-year-old is like literally screaming and shouting at the top of his voice for no rhyme or reason. Even if I sit him down and ask, hey, what's up? You've been doing this for the past 12 hours, and literally 12 hours now. The moment he gets up, right, he's just shouting for no rhyme or reason, and just like, being nasty to his siblings, right, all the way like that, all the way until like 7, 8 in the evening. And you wonder why. Right, and you just want to monitor whether it's a 1 time, 2 time. Right, so I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that's being used by mental health practitioners, right, to actually diagnose mental disorders, right. So according to, just give you a broad understanding, right, when we use that, what we actually look out for is like this kind of behaviors, right, these extremities and out of the normal behaviors, right. It needs to be present over a certain period of time and the intensity of it. So the frequency and the intensity. So what you want to do is to basically look out for these two, right? The frequency and the intensity based on the behavior that is extreme and that's abnormal, right? If it's too frequent, if it's too intense, right? Then it's time really to do something about it, right? And if you, I guess, worried, I mean,
sorry,
no harm also checking in earlier.
How would you identify, suicidal signs in children that are suffering depression silently? They're deliberately trying to hide that anything is wrong from their parents or their peers even. How do you go about identifying this? You mentioned earlier, I think, cutting, but if there are not more obvious signs, what can parents do?
I mean, if it's not so obvious, then very tough, right? I mean, then, but at the same time, you don't be too hard on yourself. So if that was the case, in a situation where you really cannot tell whatsoever, right, and you're blindsided by so many ways, right, and that's where you want to basically be in connection with like the school counselor, your neighbors, the friends, the parents of your kids' friends. All these networks really help, right? And it's no harm checking in with like, hey, my son spoke to your son the other day. I mean, are you aware of them having talked about this? I mean, do you think there was anything there? Any concerns there? I mean, these kind of conversations you want to be able to freely engage, right? So that becomes your village, like you said, just now. It takes a village, right, to reach a child. So you want to really know all your village's friends, right? And that helps, right? Even your kids' friends, those are also very helpful, especially when there is like prior, you have made acquaintance with them previously, right? It's good to also reach out to them. But I caution some parents, right, who literally like, well, not so good, but stalk their kids, right? And then even stalk their kids' friends. Some degree of respect, right? And space, privacy also need to be accorded to them. And being that they're also minors, right? So you want to be able to be discerning, right, in your action. I know there's certain worry lah, sometimes overprotectiveness also comes to play, but when you want to start acting out of the protection of your own child, right, you want to also be discerning and responsible, right, in your actions as an adult. Very quickly, so I missed out the second part of the question about the rewards. Actually, all the more you want to actually use rewards. Why? Because rewards plays into the limbic system very well, very nicely, right? Because it excites them, and hopefully it's meaningful reward. Meaning to say that this is something that they really want. It builds them. It builds their. It gives everybody, especially your child, the knowledge, right, to learn how to delay gratification, and even if they have obtained the gratification, it will give them a little bit more knowledge to sustain a bit more before they would ask for another reward. So you want to keep prolonging it, right? And it's very healthy if you are able to do that.
We're gonna call it a night for now. Thank you so much, Nicholas Lim, for sharing your invaluable insights and advice. I think we can all agree that this was very fruitful, very helpful session as well. And I think for those of us that were wondering whether there will be the slides being shared, we will send the recording, I think, a month from now. It requires a bit of editing before we send that over to everyone. Okay, so
is it okay? Is it okay if Adrian just show slide number 3? This is just to help everybody take away at least the substance of our discussion this evening.
Yeah.
This is the one I'm talking about. The whole limbic and the prefrontal thing, and it's just a 30-pager easy reading, and if you want to really substantiate in terms of the information, the theory aspects of it, deepen their understanding, this is something that you can go into. It's very much everything that we talked about this evening, right? But I guess it's just more written form. And then the graphics are there, the graphs are there, the terminologies are there, technical words are there, right? Yeah, so for those who are interested. Otherwise, Gabriel, you mentioning earlier about the editing, this is the other material that you can look forward to. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Really appreciate it. We're going to hand it over to the other Nicholas now.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Thank you, Nick Lim. Nick, there was a question. So your ebook is a downloadable book, right?
Yeah, it's a digital book. 30 pager.
Okay, so just go to the website, to the link, and you can download the information there. So fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to share also that the next month, there's a part 2 of this talk, right? So raising kids sane and safe. And I guess, if this was, let me see, how many years ago when I was a child? Too many, more 30, 40 years ago, I do not know. I guess we'll be talking about like how to have your kids avoid Centrepoint or something like that. I don't know, Far East. My kids are hanging out at Far East too often. But now I guess times have changed, right? Everybody is, and it was covered a fair deal in tonight's topic, talking about online behavior, gaming, so on and so forth. It's so foreign to most parents. Like, we did not grow up with this, right? Our games were, I don't know, Chak Tek, 5 stones. I do not know what, yay, 0 point. Things now are so much more complicated. We do not know what our kids are up to. So this session is actually a fairly lengthy one, right? We only had 1.5 hours today. The next session is on the 13th of November, Saturday morning, from 9:30 to 12:30, and it will give you an insight into the world of gaming. In fact, 2 of the speakers, apart from Nick Lim, 2 of the speakers are Potato Fluff and Ape Shit. I'm just reading off the slide, right? So we will get a real insight into gaming. And part 2, cyber health, dealing with gaming and social media addiction. Please sign up. We will be sending out if you're on our mailing list, we will be sending you an email. You can register there. Do join us. Also, please, the talks are free. And again, the mission of FES is to help educate parents to build loving and lasting families. So again, if you feel free to forward this to other people who you know may be struggling with kids, not being able to connect. They are so into gaming. I don't understand what they're doing, and so we'll talk more about this at the next session in part 2 on 13th November. The session will be facilitated by Olivia, who I think some of you would have met on the first session when we talked about exam stress the last time round, right? But thank you so much. Have a good night, and we will see you next month.